Millionaire CEO was dancing with his fiancée when two little boys approached and said, "You're our dad." "Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. May the Almighty bless every one of you with unshakable strength, endless love, and wisdom that lights your path. May every woman in this family feel honored, cherished, and protected, for you are the heartbeat of every home, the pillars of every family, and the silent warriors who carry hope. May your hearts overflow with peace, your minds with clarity, and your souls with joy that nothing can diminish. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, write, 'I am with Mr. Peter.'" John Wayne had conquered the world by age 38, and tonight's engagement party to Victoria Montgomery proved it. His downtown penthouse stretched across the entire 40th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the city he'd dominated through 15 years of ruthless ambition. Every light below represented a victory. Contracts signed, competitors crushed, impossible deals closed through methods he never discussed at dinner parties. 200 guests filled his home. Politicians, business titans, society figures whose names opened doors money alone couldn't. Champagne flowed freely, Dom Perignon at $500 per bottle, and he'd ordered 30 cases without blinking because money was just numbers now. The string quartet in the corner was flown in from Vienna because Victoria had mentioned once that she loved Mozart, and John Wayne didn't do anything halfway. Victoria Montgomery herself stood beside him as they danced, her 8-carat engagement ring catching the chandelier light. She was everything he'd climbed mountains to deserve: old money, political dynasty, a last name that meant power in rooms where new money couldn't buy entrance. Her father, Harrison Montgomery, controlled 40% of city development through shell corporations and strategic investments. Her brothers sat in the DA's office and city council. This marriage wasn't about love. Love was for people who had time for sentiment. This was about building an empire that would outlast them both. John had started with nothing, less than nothing. His father had walked out when John was 7, leaving them with empty cupboards and unpaid rent, welfare and food stamps, and nights going hungry while his mother cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear. John remembered being that scared little boy, remembered swearing on everything he had that he'd never be poor again, never be powerless again, never feel that terror of not knowing if tomorrow would bring food or eviction. So he'd climbed savagely, destroyed anyone in his way, built an empire where mercy was weakness and sentiment was suicide. Started with nothing, now owned everything, and tonight was his coronation. Then the crowd parted. Something biblical about it, something terrible. 200 people in designer clothes and borrowed jewelry suddenly splitting like the Red Sea, sensing something catastrophic approaching. 2 small boys pushed through, identical twins, 9 years old maybe, wearing clothes that didn't quite fit right. Thrift store probably, clean but worn, wrong sizes, sleeves too long. They had John's face, exactly his face from childhood photographs his mother kept in albums he hadn't looked at in 20 years. Same dark eyes that had watched his father walk away. Same stubborn chin, same crooked nose he'd broken at 12 and never fixed because surgery cost money they didn't have. The boy on the left, wearing a wrinkled superhero t-shirt that had been washed so many times the colors were fading, opened his mouth and shouted loud enough to kill the Mozart mid-note. "Mom said you're our sperm donor." 200 heads turned in synchronized horror. John couldn't move. His arms fell from Victoria's waist. His brain refused to process what his eyes saw with perfect clarity. Couldn't be real. Couldn't be possible. He had no children. He would have remembered children, except he wouldn't have, not if he'd decided they didn't exist. The quieter twin, neat button-up shirt buttoned wrong, one side tucked in and one side hanging out, anxious eyes darting around the room like he expected to be thrown out any second, whispered just loud enough to shatter John's entire world. "We came to meet you. For my school project, Mrs. Henderson assigned family trees, and I had to put both parents' names, and your spot was blank. And she asked why in front of the whole class, and I said I didn't know. And Gary told everyone you abandoned us before we were born and ran away like a coward. And some of the kids started laughing, and some started asking questions, and we just wanted to see if you were real or if Mom made you up. Debbie Reynolds appeared behind them, and John forgot how to breathe. 10 years since he'd last seen her, and the transformation was staggering. She'd been 23 then, retail clerk at Macy's making $9 an hour, no college degree, sweet smile that made him feel like maybe ambition wasn't everything. He dismissed her as temporary, a pleasant distraction while he climbed, too ordinary for someone destined for extraordinary. Now she was something else entirely. Simple black dress that probably cost less than the appetizers being served tonight. No jewelry, except a practical watch, hair pulled back efficiently. But carrying herself with strength that came from surviving things that should have killed you, from raising children alone, from building a life from rubble. Looking at him not with anger or hope or anything soft he could manipulate, just flat recognition. Like seeing garbage on the sidewalk you need to step around. "Boys, we're leaving," she said, voice carrying that specific tone mothers develop when fury is barely leashed behind protection. "Jerry needed to see you exist," Debbie said directly to John, each word a knife thrown with precision. "So he could complete his school assignment with actual proof that his father is a real person, and not just a story I invented to explain why we're broken. The teacher required photographic evidence, or a signature, or something concrete. Now he has his proof. We're done here." She grabbed both boys' hands, firm but gentle, starting to turn toward the elevator. The loud one, Gary, yelled back over his shoulder without looking, voice carrying pure accusation to every corner of the penthouse. "He doesn't even want to know our names. You were right about him, Mom. He's exactly the coward you said." The entire penthouse held its breath. 200 wealthy, influential people, frozen like someone had hit pause on reality. Then Victoria's scream detonated the frozen moment into chaos. "You have children!" Her voice could shatter crystal. "You told me your past was clean. You swore in the prenup negotiations that there were no prior obligations, no children, no financial entanglements. You lied!" "Victoria, I can explain." Explain? 2 9-year-olds just called you their father in front of the mayor, in front of my family." Phones materialized everywhere. 20, 30, 50 people pretending to check messages while obviously filming, recording John's destruction for posterity, uploading in real time to platforms that would make him infamous by sunrise. Someone whispered loudly enough to be heard across the room, "Those can't be his children. John Wayne doesn't have kids." Another voice interrupted, sharp with realization. "Look at their faces. That's his nose, his chin, his eyes. Those are definitely his." Victoria grabbed her champagne flute, Waterford crystal, $300 each, and hurled it at the floor between them, glass exploding like a grenade. $15,000 Persian rug ruined with champagne and crystal shards. "We're done. My family will destroy you. The board will vote you out. Everyone will know what kind of monster you are." She ripped the 8-carat ring off her finger, custom designed, 6 weeks for the perfect stone, and threw it at his face. It hit his cheek hard enough to sting, bounced off, disappeared into expensive carpet. The party collapsed within minutes. Guests evacuated, already crafting their versions of the story. Whispers echoing, "Did you see those kids?" He abandoned them for 9 years, while building his fortune. What kind of monster? John stood alone with half-empty champagne bottles, scattered like casualties, and expensive food congealing on silver platters. The city lights below suddenly looked like they were judging him. His phone exploded with notifications, business partners panicking, news alerts, CEO's secret children crash engagement party. One text turned his blood to ice. Harrison Montgomery. "Board meeting, Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late to your own execution." John walked to his office, opened the wall safe behind a Rothko painting. The check stub was there after 10 years, $50,000, made out to Debbie Reynolds. Date, March 15th, 2015. His handwriting on the memo line, "For the problem. Don't contact me again." He'd called his children the problem. They'd grown up knowing it. His phone rang. "Mom." "I saw the video," she said, ice in every syllable. "Someone posted it on Facebook and tagged me. Those boys have your face, my grandsons, and I'm learning about them on social media." "Mom, you have children for 9 years and never told me." "I didn't know." "Liar. Someone posted that check for the problem. You knew. You paid to make them disappear because they were inconvenient. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain how my son, the boy I raised alone after your father left us with nothing, could do the same thing to his own children." The comparison hit like a punch. His father had abandoned them when John was 7, left them with nothing. John swore he'd never be like that man. And here he was. "You're no son of mine until you fix this," his mother said. "Don't call me. Fix what you've done or don't contact me again." She hung up. John sat in his office, awards on walls, view of conquered city, and realized he'd built a monument to nothing. 2 boys he didn't know. A woman with earned contempt. A mother who disowned him. A fiancée gone. An empire crumbling. He remembered 10 years ago, Debbie in his apartment. "John, I'm pregnant." Him pacing. "How did this happen? We've been together 6 months. I talked about my future. You were supposed to be part of that, not this." He'd written a check, $50,000. "That's enough to take care of it. Get it handled or don't. Either way, we're done." She'd stared at that check like it was poisonous, then left. He never saw her again until tonight. John watched the viral video on his phone. Gary's angry face, Jerry's anxious tears, Debbie's protective fury, and realized he'd conquered the city, built an empire, claimed victory, and lost the only war that ever mattered. Chapter 2. The reckoning morning came with consequences brutal and immediate. Deadbeat Dad Billionaire trended worldwide within 6 hours. News outlets picked it up before sunrise. Business partners sent carefully neutral texts that meant panic. "Call me. We should talk." Emergency meeting. Victoria's family, who owned 30% of his company through strategic investments, stayed ominously silent, which was infinitely worse than rage. John's assistant Rebecca quit via email at 6:47 a.m. "I can't work for someone who abandoned his own children, effective immediately." 15 years of reputation building gone overnight. But John barely noticed the professional destruction. He was staring at something far worse than social media trending topics. His old calendar recovered from email archives. March 15th, 10 years ago, the day he'd given Debbie that check. 3 back-to-back meetings scheduled, then drinks with investors at 5, dinner with someone whose name he didn't even remember now at 8. He'd written that check between the 2nd and 3rd meeting, handed it over like approving office supply orders, gone back to work without a second thought. Debbie hadn't been a person to him. She'd been an interruption, a problem requiring a solution so he could focus on what actually mattered. $50,000 to make her disappear. Except nothing had actually mattered. Not the meetings, not the investors, not the dinner, none of it. John drove to her address. Public records made it easy to find. Middle-class suburb he would have called beneath him a week ago. Her house was modest but well kept. 2-story, small yard with a swing set visible through the fence. The kind of house that whispered stability, built through actual work and sacrifice. She'd built this without him, despite him. He knocked. Debbie answered, holding a baseball bat. "You have 60 seconds before I call police." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. No anger, just statement of intention. "I came to apologize." "For which part? Abandoning us? Calling your children a problem? Or showing up 10 years later because you got caught and it's ruining your reputation?" "All of it." "Great, you apologized. Now leave." "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" Her laugh could cut glass. "That you were young, scared, focused on your career. I was 23, pregnant, working retail for $9 an hour. You think I wasn't scared?" "The difference is, I didn't have the option to run. When you're poor and pregnant, you don't get to choose career over children. You get children and figure it out. But you had money, had options, had the privilege to just make us disappear with a check and go back to your life like we never existed. I know I was wrong. Do you? Do you actually know what it's like raising twins alone on $9 an hour? Do you know what it's like explaining to a 4-year-old why his father doesn't want him? Do you know what it's like watching your son cry himself to sleep, asking what's wrong with him that makes his daddy stay away? Her voice cracked just slightly on that last word before the steel came back. John had no answer. Nothing he could say would make any of it better. "Mommy, who's that?" Gary appeared in the hallway behind her. He recognized John immediately, his face going hard. "Why is he here?" Jerry peeked from behind Debbie, anxious eyes wide with fear. "Boys, go to your room." "Is he leaving?" Gary demanded. "Because he's good at that. Leaving is what he does best." "Gary, no! He left before we were even born. Now he shows up because the internet made him look bad. He doesn't care about us. He cares about fixing his reputation." The accusation landed with devastating accuracy because it was partially true. "Get off my property," Debbie said, not angry anymore, just tired. "Done. You walked away 10 years ago. You don't get to walk back in because it's convenient now." The door closed with quiet finality. John stood on the porch, staring at white paint and a cheerful doorbell he'd never hear from inside. Through the window, he watched Debbie kneel down and pull both boys into a hug, watched her mouth move, probably explaining, probably protecting them even from the full truth about how terrible their father actually was. Gary was crying angry tears. Jerry just stared at nothing with those anxious, too-old eyes. That night, business partner David Chen called. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 8. Harrison Montgomery called it personally. John, they're removing you as CEO. I figured. Then fight this. Get lawyers. This is your company." "Is it? I built it by destroying people, stepping on anyone in my way, sacrificing everything decent for profit. Maybe losing it is just justice catching up." "You're seriously just giving up?" "I'm accepting consequences for once in my life." The board meeting was execution by polite committee. 12 members seated around Italian marble conference table. Harrison Montgomery at the head, looking like a king preparing to behead a traitor. "The viral scandal has cost us 3 major clients. Stock dropped 23% yesterday alone, but more concerning are the questions being raised about your business practices and moral character. Whether a man who would abandon his own children possesses the ethical foundation to lead this company. Whether someone who refers to human beings as problems can be trusted with employee welfare and stakeholder interests." Everything Harrison said was true. John had destroyed competitors ruthlessly, made decisions based purely on profit without regard for human cost, built his empire on the backs of people he considered obstacles rather than human beings. "The board has voted to remove you as CEO effective immediately. Given recent stock depreciation and moral turpitude clause in your contract, we're offering buyout at 30 cents on the dollar." John signed the papers without argument, gave up his empire without fighting. David stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're just accepting this? Just like that?" "Yes. Why?" "Because I finally figured out what actually matters in life, and it's not this. It was never this." John walked out of that boardroom with a severance package worth millions and absolutely nothing else. His penthouse would be sold, his cars, his art collection, everything liquidated. He was still wealthy by any objective measure but completely powerless, rich but utterly irrelevant, and his sons still had no father. He called Dr. Helen Martinez that afternoon, child psychologist specializing in severe parental abandonment cases. "I need help learning how to approach children who hate me and have every right to hate me." "Why do you want to approach them?" she asked directly. "Because they're my sons." "You didn't care about that 10 years ago. What changed?" John sat in genuine silence, really thinking about the question instead of crafting the answer that sounded best. "Because I saw their faces," he said finally. Because Gary's anger isn't just anger, it's grief dressed up as rage. Because Jerry's anxiety isn't just nervousness, it's the bone-deep terror of a child who believes he wasn't worth staying for. Because I've spent 10 years building things that ultimately don't matter and ignoring the only things that actually do matter. That's honest, Dr. Martinez said, and John could hear the surprise in her voice. Most parents who call me lie about their motivations, try to make themselves sound better than they are. Come see me tomorrow at 2. We'll figure out if real change is even possible for you. John hung up and stood at his penthouse window, staring at the city lights spread out below. He'd climbed so high, conquered so much, sacrificed everything to reach the top. And from up here, for the first time in his adult life, he could see with perfect clarity he'd been climbing the wrong mountain entirely. Chapter 3. The Work. Dr. Helen Martinez's office was nothing like the expensive therapists John had seen over the years for executive stress management. Small, converted house in a modest neighborhood, mismatched furniture that looked comfortable rather than impressive, coffee stains on the carpet, children's drawings taped to one wall, real, unpretentious, the kind of place where actual healing might happen instead of wealthy people paying to feel better about being terrible. "Tell me about your father," Dr. Martinez said without preamble after John sat down. 50-ish woman with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. The kind of person who'd seen every variety of human failure and stopped being shocked by any of it. Why does that matter? Because men who abandon their children usually learn the behavior somewhere. Abandonment echoes across generations. So, tell me about your father. John took a breath he didn't particularly want to take. He left when I was 7 years old, walked out one morning saying he was going for cigarettes and never came back. We went from working class to welfare overnight. I remember being hungry. I remember watching my mother cry at night when she thought I was asleep. I remember eating cereal for dinner 3 days in a row because that's all we had. I remember swearing on everything I had that I would never be poor again, never be that powerless, never feel that kind of fear. And you succeeded at that goal. Did I? I escaped poverty by becoming exactly what I hated most. I abandoned my own children the same way my father abandoned me, just with more money involved. Why did you give Debbie that check 10 years ago? To make her disappear. To make the whole problem go away so I could keep climbing the ladder without anything slowing me down. Did you think about what she might do? A 23-year-old woman, pregnant and alone, working retail for poverty wages. No, I didn't think about her at all after she left my apartment that day. I went back to work, had my scheduled meetings, made my deals, forgot she existed within a week, maybe less. That's not cruelty, Dr. Martinez said, her voice carefully neutral. That's somehow worse than cruelty. That's complete erasure. She wasn't even important enough to be deliberately cruel to. She was just gone, dismissed, deleted from your reality. The truth of that observation hit John like a physical blow to the chest. You're right, I erased her like deleting an email I didn't want to deal with. So the question becomes, can you actually change? Can you become someone who sees other people as human beings rather than obstacles or irrelevancies? I don't know, John admitted. I genuinely don't know if I'm capable of that kind of fundamental change. At least that's honest. We'll start with honesty and see where it takes us. Dr. Martinez leaned forward in her chair. I'm going to tell you what's happening with your sons right now. Not to punish you, though it will feel like punishment, but because you need to understand the full scope of damage before you can even begin to address it. She pulled out a file. Gary is currently failing every single class. He's been suspended twice in the past month for fighting. Both times he attacked other students who made comments about you or about his mother. He's processing your abandonment as definitive proof that he's fundamentally flawed and unlovable, that there's something wrong with him that even his own father could see and reject before he was born. No, that's not, John started, but Dr. Martinez held up a hand. Jerry is worse in different ways. He has panic attacks so severe they've hospitalized him twice in the past 2 weeks. He compulsively pulls out his eyelashes when anxious. There are visible bald patches in both eyebrows now. He told his therapist last week that he wishes he'd never been born because then his existence wouldn't have driven his father away. Think about that. A 9-year-old child wishing for non-existence because he blames himself for your choices. John felt physically ill. His hands were shaking. Jerry thinks he's the problem. That's what I taught him by calling him a problem before he could even breathe. That his existence itself is wrong. Yes, and you can't undo that belief system with apologies or explanations or grand gestures. You can't fix 10 years of foundational damage with words. You can only show up consistently, day after day, year after year, and hope that eventually, maybe, they might start to believe they're worth showing up for. How long does that take? Maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe never. There's no timeline for earning trust you destroyed before children could form memories. Some wounds never fully heal. They just become scars people learn to live with. John sat with that unbearable weight pressing down on his chest. I want to try anyway, even knowing it might not work, even knowing they might hate me forever. Why? If it might take 20 years of consistent effort, if they might never forgive you, if you might do all this work and still end up with nothing, why try? John thought about that question for a long moment. Because they deserve a father who tries, even if I'm terrible at it, even if I fail, even if they hate me until the day I die. They deserve someone showing up and trying, and I'm the only person who can be that for them. Dr. Martinez studied him with those shrewd, kind eyes. That's the first thing you've said that makes me think real change might actually be possible. Not, I deserve a second chance. Not, I want them to forgive me so I can stop feeling guilty. Just, they deserve someone showing up. That's the beginning of actual transformation, when it stops being about what you want and starts being about what they need. She handed him a reading list, books on child development, attachment theory, trauma, long-term effects of parental abandonment, essays written by adult children who'd been abandoned, describing in painful detail what it felt like to grow up unwanted. You do nothing yet as far as contacting them. You stay away until Debbie decides whether she'll even allow any contact. That might be never. While you wait, you work on yourself. Therapy with me twice weekly minimum. Parenting classes. Read everything on this list. Learn. Change. Become someone fundamentally different than the man who wrote that check. And if Debbie never allows contact with them, then you do all this work anyway. Not for them, for yourself. So you stop being the kind of man who erases people when they become inconvenient. So you become someone capable of seeing other humans as humans. Whether or not your sons ever benefit from that change, the work still matters. John took the reading list home that night and started immediately. Read until 3 a.m. One essay destroyed him completely, written by a woman now 35 years old whose father had left before she was born. I spent my entire childhood wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough to make my father stay, what defect I possessed that he could sense and reject before I even existed. It took 20 years of intensive therapy to intellectually understand that nothing was wrong with me, but emotionally, I still don't believe people when they say they love me. I still wait for everyone to leave. I still believe deep in my bones that I'm fundamentally unlovable. My father's abandonment became the lens through which I view every relationship. He broke something in me before I took my first breath, and 35 years later, that broken thing still shapes every day of my life. John put the book down and wept. Actually wept. Because that woman could be Jerry in 25 years, could be Gary. Their father's abandonment becoming the foundational wound that poisoned every relationship they'd ever have. He enrolled in parenting classes the next day, 8-week course at a community center across town, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. 20 people sitting in a church basement with fluorescent lighting and folding metal chairs. Divorced fathers trying desperately to rebuild burned bridges. Single mothers at the end of their rope. Foster parents learning to love children damaged by previous adults. When the facilitator asked everyone to introduce themselves and share why they were there, 20 faces turned toward John. Some of them recognized him from the viral video. He saw it in their eyes. Judgment, disgust, recognition. "I'm John," he said clearly. "I abandoned my children before they were born. Paid for an abortion instead of being a father. They found me 10 years later. I have no idea how to fix what I've broken, or if it can even be fixed. But I'm here to learn anyway." Long silence. Then an older man across the circle, weathered face and exhausted eyes, spoke up. "You can't fix it. That's the first thing you need to understand. You can only start showing up now and be consistent. But starting today doesn't erase 10 years. It doesn't undo the damage. Your kids have been unwanted for their entire conscious existence. That's their foundation. Everything you do now gets built on that foundation of rejection. So, what do I do? You show up every single day, when it's boring, when it's hard, when they reject you, when they hate you, when it would be so much easier to just walk away again. You show up anyway, for years, for decades, maybe for the rest of your life, and you hope it's enough. But you need to accept right now that it might never be enough." Another woman added, voice heavy with hard-earned wisdom. "My ex-husband left when our daughter was 2, came back when she was 12, full of apologies and promises and grand gestures. Know what she told him? You don't get to be my dad just because you finally feel guilty. You have to actually earn it." She's 20 years old now. They talk maybe twice a year on holidays. He earned distant acquaintance, not dad. 10 years of consistent effort bought him occasional phone calls. "How long does earning it actually take?" John asked, knowing he wouldn't like the answer. The older man smiled sadly. "My daughter is 26 years old. I left when she was 3. I've been trying to rebuild that relationship for 23 years now. We have dinner together once a month. She doesn't hate me anymore, which is progress, but she doesn't love me either, not really. She tolerates me. After 23 years of showing up consistently, I've earned tolerated. The fact that you're asking how long tells me you still don't fully understand. There is no timeline. There's no finish line where you cross and everything's fixed. There's just showing up forever until you die and hoping that eventually it means something to them." John attended every single session after that, took detailed notes, did all the homework, reading assignments, reflection exercises, role-playing difficult conversations. Started therapy with Dr. Martinez twice weekly, as promised. In their 3rd session, she asked him directly, "Why did you really abandon them? Not the surface reason, the deep truth." "I was focused on building my career." That's still the excuse talking. Go deeper. What's the real reason underneath the excuse? John sat in uncomfortable silence for a long time. "I was terrified of failing, of being poor again, of being powerless. My father left us with absolutely nothing. I spent years hungry and scared and powerless. I swore I would never be in that position again. When Debbie told me she was pregnant, it felt like a trap, like being pulled back down into poverty and powerlessness when I'd worked so hard to climb out. And now that you've achieved wealth and power, now I realize I climbed out of poverty straight into a different kind of emptiness. I have $10 million in the bank and nobody to share any of it with. I built an empire and ruled over it completely alone. I became exactly what I feared most, alone and empty inside, just with nicer furniture and better food." That's real progress, recognizing the pattern. But recognition isn't the same as change. So here's the crucial question. What are you actually willing to sacrifice to be their father? Anything, everything. Even the career you destroyed them to build, even the wealth and status and power that you chose over their existence. Are you willing to lose all of that if it means showing up for them? John opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. Opened it again. The honest answer was that he didn't know. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I want to say yes, but I don't actually know if I'm capable of choosing them over everything I've built. At least that's honest. Come back next session when you've really thought about that question. Because without genuine willingness to sacrifice what you value most, this is just performance. And children can smell performance from a mile away. They'll know if you're doing this for them or doing this to make yourself feel better, and if you're not willing to actually lose everything to gain them, they'll never trust that you won't abandon them again when things get difficult. Meanwhile, across the city, Debbie was drowning in her own way. Gary was failing every single class. Simply stopped trying, told his therapist, "Why does any of it matter when nothing matters?" Jerry couldn't make it through a full school day without panic attacks. Debbie had been called to pick him up early 3 times just this week. Therapy for both boys 3 times weekly at $150 per session. Insurance covered 40%. She was paying $90 per session times 6 sessions weekly. $540 a week. $2,300 a month for therapy alone, on top of regular bills and mortgage and everything else. Her graphic design business was crumbling under the weight of it all. Lost 3 major clients in 2 weeks because she kept missing deadlines, too distracted by crisis after crisis with the boys. Revenue down 43% compared to last month. Her carefully built savings, 9 years of sacrifice and smart financial decisions, evaporating like water in the desert sun. She pulled out her budget spreadsheet at 2 a.m. and ran the numbers again and again, hoping they'd somehow change. They didn't. At this rate, she had maybe 4 months before she'd have to choose between therapy for the boys and keeping the house. She pulled out that old check from the safe where she'd kept it as evidence all these years. $50,000. Made out to her. 10 years old now. Would it even clear after all this time? More importantly, should she even try to cash it? It was blood money, payment to murder her children before they were born. Taking it felt like validating what he'd tried to do, like saying the money could somehow make up for calling them a problem. But her children needed help desperately, and she couldn't afford to give them what they needed. The same impossible choice John had forced on her 10 years ago, just in a different form. Back then, take the money and kill them, or keep them and suffer alone. Now, take the blood money to save them, or refuse it on principle and watch them suffer. Debbie stared at that check until sunrise, hating John Wayne for putting her in this position. Again, always again, his choices still destroying their lives even when he was trying to help, even when he was gone, even when he was nothing but a ghost they couldn't escape. She made a decision, put the check back in the safe, refused to give him that power over them. Instead, she called the bank and took out a second mortgage on her house. Borrowed against the home she'd built over 9 years to pay for the therapy her children needed because their father had abandoned them. And hated John Wayne more deeply than she'd thought humanly possible. But also, and this was the confusing part that made her angry at herself, found herself thinking about him at odd, unexpected moments. Not the monster who'd abandoned them, not the man who'd called their children a problem, but the boy he'd been when they first met. Funny, kind, ambitious but not cruel yet. He'd made her laugh, made her feel seen and valued. They'd talked about building futures together, small dreams, reasonable dreams, shared dreams. Then ambition had eaten him from the inside out like cancer until nothing remained but the drive for more, always more. She wondered sometimes if that person she'd loved still existed somewhere underneath the monster. Probably not. Probably he was gone forever, killed by his own choices and replaced entirely by John Wayne, the empire builder. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she wondered, and hated herself for wondering, and hated him for making her wonder. Chapter 4. The Unexpected. Opening. 3 months passed in this holding pattern. John stayed away from Debbie and the boys completely. No contact, no attempts to see them, no gifts showing up on their doorstep. Just work, internal work. Therapy twice weekly with Dr. Martinez, where she systematically dismantled every defense mechanism and excuse he'd ever constructed. Parenting classes Tuesday and Thursday evenings, where he sat with other broken adults trying to learn how to be better. Reading every night until his eyes burned, books on child development, essays on abandonment, research on trauma. He set up educational trust funds for both boys through his lawyer. Anonymous funds that would pay for college, therapy, medical expenses, whatever they might need. Did it through legal channels Debbie couldn't refuse because she'd never know the money existed until the boys needed it. His only way of providing for them from a distance, and he volunteered. Started teaching financial literacy classes at Riverside Community Center 3 blocks from the boys' school. Program for at-risk teenagers, kids from difficult backgrounds who needed practical skills. John taught them how to budget, how to negotiate, how to turn ambition into achievement without destroying themselves in the process. He was surprisingly good at it. Turns out breaking yourself chasing success actually qualified him to teach others how not to make the same mistakes. Week 7, a small, angry kid showed up who was too young for the program, maybe 9 years old, way below the 14-year-old minimum. Someone had sent him here instead of suspension, apparently. Kid slouched in the back row, radiating fury like heat, arms crossed defensively across his chest. John didn't recognize him immediately. Different context, different lighting, wearing different clothes than that night at the party. Then the kid spoke, voice dripping with contempt. "This is stupid. Business is stupid. Money is stupid. Rich people are stupid." That voice. John knew that voice. His heart stopped. His son was here. Gary was sitting 10 feet away in his classroom and didn't realize who was teaching. John made a split-second decision, didn't announce himself, didn't reveal the connection, just treated Gary exactly like any other kid in the program. "You think money's stupid?" John asked calmly. "Yeah, money doesn't fix anything. People think it does, but it doesn't." "You're absolutely right about that." Gary blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. "What?" "You're right. Money doesn't fix anything that actually matters. Doesn't fix relationships. Doesn't fix trust. Doesn't fix pain or loneliness or fear. Money is just a tool, like a hammer. What you do with it determines whether it helps or hurts. The tool itself is neutral." "Then why are you teaching us about it?" "Because understanding how it works means it can't control you. Poverty traps people in very specific ways. But wealth traps people too, just differently. I'm teaching you to use money without letting money use you." "That's dumb." "Probably. Most things adults teach are kind of dumb. But you're here anyway, so you might as well learn something useful." Gary slouched lower in his chair but didn't get up and leave. Over the next 6 weeks, something unexpected happened. Gary kept coming back. Kept challenging everything John said with aggressive questions, kept testing every boundary. And John kept showing up, kept being firm but fair, kept treating Gary like a small, angry person whose anger was completely legitimate, rather than like a broken child who needed gentle handling or pity. "You're angry at the whole world," John observed one evening after class ended and the other kids had left. "So what if I am?" "So that's completely fair and reasonable. World's pretty disappointing most of the time. But being angry forever just burns you up from the inside. Trust me on that. I know from experience." "How would you know anything about it?" "I was angry for about 20 years straight. Angry at being poor. Angry at my father for leaving. Angry at everyone who had more than me. I turned all that anger into ambition, climbed as high as I could, destroyed everyone who got in my way. Know what I found when I got to the top?" "What?" "More anger. And absolutely nobody to share anything with. Anger doesn't disappear when you finally get what you want. It just finds new targets to burn. The anger becomes who you are if you feed it long enough." Gary studied him with those 2 old eyes, eyes that had seen too much disappointment already. "You really believe all that?" "Yeah, I do." "Why are you telling me this stuff?" "Because you remind me of myself at your age, and I'm hoping you figure out something I didn't, that the anger is real and the anger is fair, but you don't have to let it destroy you completely." Week 5, Jerry appeared. Gary had brought him. The quieter twin clutching a notebook, hiding slightly behind his louder brother. "He wanted to come," Gary said with defensive aggression, daring John to say no. "That okay with you?" "Of course it's okay." Jerry was everything Gary wasn't. Anxious where Gary was angry. Careful where Gary was confrontational. Asked permission for absolutely everything. "Can I sit here? Is it okay if I take notes? Should I raise my hand before asking questions?" John made space for Jerry's nervousness without drawing attention to it or making him feel ashamed of needing reassurance. Answered his carefully phrased questions with patience. Jerry slowly relaxed, started asking real questions instead of just permission to exist in the space. How do you know when ambition becomes greed? When you're willing to hurt other people to get what you want. Have you hurt people to get what you wanted? John met Jerry's eyes, his own eyes reflected in a smaller, better, more innocent face. Yes, I have. On purpose. Sometimes. And sometimes I told myself it was necessary, that I had no choice, that they were in my way and I had to do it. That's how most people hurt others and sleep at night, by calling it necessary. Jerry wrote that down in his careful, precise handwriting. For 6 weeks, John spent 2 hours twice weekly teaching a group of at-risk teenagers, including his own sons, who had no idea their teacher was their father. He learned about them indirectly through casual comments. Gary mentioned, "My mum's boyfriend Richard, who was nice but boring and always wanted to talk about feelings." So Debbie was dating someone. John felt something twist painfully in his chest, but had absolutely no right to feel anything about her choices. Jerry talked obsessively about bread baking, specifically Japanese milk bread, Hokkaido technique, achieving perfect texture through precise temperature control and timing. That night, John researched it for 3 hours, learned about Tangjong method, about why 65 degrees Celsius was the magic temperature for starch gelatinization, about the chemistry of creating that specific soft texture. Next class, he casually asked Jerry, "Have you tried the Tangjong technique with the water at exactly 65 degrees Celsius? That's the temperature where the starch gelatinizes perfectly and creates that texture you're trying to achieve." Jerry's entire face lit up like sunrise. "You actually know about Tangjong?" "Read about it. Seems like precision really matters with that technique." "It does. Everyone treats baking like it's flexible, but it's actually science. Every single degree matters. Every gram, it's chemistry pretending to be cooking." They talked about bread science for 20 minutes, while other kids looked bored but tolerant. Gary rolled his eyes dramatically, but didn't interrupt or make fun of his brother. John learned his son loved control and precision in a life that had given him neither, loved understanding exactly how things worked, loved systems and rules because chaos and unpredictability terrified him. Week 7 ended with Jerry asking John to sign his notebook after class. "My teacher requires adult signatures from people who teach us things." John signed without thinking about it. John Wayne in his clear, recognizable signature. Jerry stared at the name, went completely pale, looked up at John with dawning horror in his eyes. That's your name? You're John Wayne?" John's stomach dropped through the floor. "Yes." Jerry backed away like John had suddenly burst into flames. "You're him! You're..." Gary heard the commotion, looked over, saw Jerry's face, crossed the room in 3 fast strides, looked at the signature, looked at John. Understanding crashed across his features like a tsunami. "You're him?" Voice like breaking glass, like a building collapsing. "You've been lying this whole time?" "Gary, I can explain. You tricked us. You let us trust you without telling us who you were. That's lying. That's manipulation." Other kids in the room stopped what they were doing, everyone staring now. "I didn't lie. I never said I wasn't." "You didn't say. That's the exact same thing as lying. That's worse than lying." Jerry started crying, not loud, just silent tears streaming down his face, the kind of crying that comes from someplace so broken and deep that sound can't reach it. Gary grabbed Jerry's hand fiercely. "We're leaving, right now." They ran out together. John stood completely frozen as the truth of what he'd done crashed over him in waves. He'd tried to earn his way back into their lives through deception. Even his attempts to change, his attempts to do better, were contaminated by fundamental dishonesty about who he was. He couldn't do anything right. Every path he chose led to more damage. Chapter 5. The Consequences. Debbie stormed the Riverside Community Center the next afternoon like an avenging angel, pure fury radiating from her invisible waves. John was packing up his teaching materials when she burst through the door. You lied to them. Debbie, please. You got close to them by pretending to be someone else. You manipulated them into trusting you without telling them who you were. Do you understand how fundamentally sick that is? I didn't manipulate. I never lied about who I was. Yes, you did. Her voice cracked with rage and pain. You let them trust you while hiding the most important truth. Jerry had a panic attack so severe last night that I had to take him to the ER. Gary punched a hole in his bedroom wall. They trusted you, John. For the first time in their lives, they trusted their father, and you were lying to them. The things I taught them were real. The help I gave Gary with his anger, the conversations with Jerry about bread science, all of that was genuine. Nothing about you is genuine. Tears filled her eyes now, but she refused to let them fall. You know what Gary said last night? Even when he's being nice, he's still lying. Even when he's helping, it's still manipulation. I can't trust anything about him. Do you understand what you've done? You've taught my son that kindness is just another form of deception. John felt like he'd been punched. I was trying to earn a chance to be in their lives. By deceiving them. By pretending to be someone you're not. I wasn't pretending. I helped Gary genuinely. I cared about Jerry's bread science genuinely. That was all real. Nothing about you is real. Her voice broke completely. You're banned from this community center. You're banned from their school grounds. You stay away from my sons completely, or I swear to God I will get a restraining order. Do you understand me? Please, just let me try to explain to them. No, you're done. You got your chance, and you proved you're still the exact same person. Selfish, deceptive, willing to hurt them to get what you want. I didn't want to hurt them. But you did hurt them. You always hurt them. That's who you are. That's what you do. She stormed out, leaving John standing alone in the empty community center, surrounded by financial literacy handouts nobody wanted anymore, and the ghost of his son's laughter that he'd never hear again. That night at home, Debbie found Gary sitting alone in the dark in his bedroom. I liked him, Gary whispered, voice hollow and broken. I actually really liked him. He treated me like I wasn't just a broken kid. He didn't talk down to me like everyone else does. He was actually genuinely helpful with my anger. I know, baby. But he was lying the entire time. He knew exactly who we were and he didn't tell us, and that makes everything fake. Everything. All of it was manipulation. Gary's voice broke. I thought maybe for once someone actually cared enough to help me, but it was all strategy. All calculated. He was just using us to make himself feel better. Debbie had no answer that would help. Jerry was worse somehow. Wouldn't leave his room at all. Just sat there building towers of origami cranes he'd learned to fold, then knocking them down, building them again, knocking them down, over and over. He knew, Jerry finally whispered when Debbie sat beside him. He knew who we were the whole time, and he made me like him anyway. He made me show him my bread stuff and my origami, and he pretended to care, but he was just using that information to manipulate us into trusting him so he could feel less guilty about abandoning us. Maybe he did genuinely care about those things. How would I know? Jerry's voice rose with real panic. If he lied about the most important thing, how do I know anything he said was true? How do I trust my own judgment any more? Debbie held him while he cried, and had no answers that would fix any of it. That night, exhausted and desperate, she did something she immediately regretted. She called John. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting by the phone. Don't hang up, John said immediately, desperately. I'm not calling to talk. I'm calling to listen. You have exactly 2 minutes. Explain why you thought any of that was okay. Make me understand. John took a breath. I didn't lie. I know that's semantics and technically true, but morally false. But I genuinely didn't. I taught a class at a community center. Gary showed up on his own. He was referred there after a suspension. I didn't seek him out or plan for him to be there. And you didn't tell them who you were. No, I didn't. Why not? Because if I'd announced it immediately, Gary would have run. You would have found out and pulled them both out of the program. I wouldn't have gotten to know them at all. This was the only way I could figure out how to be near them, learn about them, maybe help them even a little. So you manipulated the situation to get what you wanted? Yes. John didn't try to deny it. I manipulated the situation. I'm guilty of that completely. But the actual things I said to them, the genuine help I gave Gary with managing his anger, the real conversations with Jerry about bread science, none of that was fake. I didn't pretend to care about Tangjong method. I spent 3 hours researching it because I wanted to genuinely connect with my son on something he cared about. That's still manipulation. Is it? Or is it just what parents do? Learn about their children's interests. Try to connect with them on their level. You're not their parent. The words hit like a knife between his ribs. John felt all the air leave his lungs. I know, he said quietly. I know I'm not. I gave up that right 10 years ago. But I'm trying to figure out if there's any possible path back from what I did. And every single path I try just leads to more damage. I don't know how to do this, Debbie. I don't know how to be in their lives without hurting them more. But I also don't know how to just accept never being in their lives at all. Long silence on the line. Then Debbie's voice, quieter now but still hard. Do you know what Gary told his therapist today? He said, John helped me more in 6 weeks than anyone else has helped me in my entire life. He actually saw me for who I am. But it was all fake. So I guess I'm not worth genuine help. I'm not worth people being honest with me. John closed his eyes, feeling physically ill. It wasn't fake. Then what was it? It was a father desperately trying to know his sons without scaring them away. It was me trying to earn even the smallest place in their lives before revealing who I was and having them reject me immediately. It was... He stopped. It was wrong. I can see that now with perfect clarity, but it came from wanting to help them, not from wanting to hurt them. Intention doesn't matter when the result is the same. They're hurt. Again. Because of you. Again. That's the pattern, John. Every single time you touch their lives, you make everything worse. Then tell me what to do. John's control finally broke completely. Tell me how to fix this, because I genuinely don't know. I read books and go to therapy and take classes and try everything I can think of, and every single thing I try just breaks them more completely. So tell me, what am I supposed to do? You stay away. That's what you do. You stay completely away and let them heal from you. And if they need me, what if they need their father? They don't need you. They need the absence of you. They need to stop being disappointed over and over. They need to stop hoping you'll somehow become someone worthy of them. They need to just move on with their lives. Debbie, we're done with this conversation. She hung up. But that night, alone in her house after putting 2 broken boys to bed, Debbie found herself crying at her kitchen table, because the truth was more complicated than she wanted it to be. Gary had been measurably better during those 6 weeks, less angry overall, more focused, coming home actually talking about concepts he'd learned, about controlling emotions instead of letting emotions control him. John had helped, genuinely helped. And Jerry had smiled more during those weeks, had talked excitedly about someone who actually listened to his bread science obsessions, who cared enough to learn about Tangjong method and gelatinization temperatures. John had connected, really connected, but all of it was contaminated by the foundational deception. Could genuine good come from manipulation? Could real connection grow from dishonest roots? She genuinely didn't know the answer. Her sister Maria came over late, found her crying. He's destroying us, Debbie whispered. Even when he tries to help, he ends up destroying us. Maria sat beside her. Maybe. Or maybe he's destroying himself and you're all just caught in the blast radius of his implosion. What's the difference? The boys are still hurt either way. The difference is motivation. If he's deliberately trying to hurt you, then you protect the boys and keep him away forever, no questions. But if he's genuinely trying to change and just doesn't know how, and keeps accidentally hurting them in the process, then maybe there's eventually a path forward, not now, but someday. I don't know if there's any path forward from this. Neither does he. That's what actually makes it real. He's stumbling around in the dark, completely lost, same as you are. Debbie wanted to hate him completely and purely. It would be so much easier if she could. But Gary's words kept echoing. He actually saw me. He actually helped me. And Jerry's, he cared about my bread science. Nobody else ever cares. Maybe John's methods were fundamentally wrong. Maybe his approach was ethically bankrupt. But maybe, just maybe, his heart was finally starting to point in something resembling the right direction. Maybe. She didn't know. And not knowing was its own special form of torture. Chapter 6. The Slow Thaw. 2 months passed in careful, painful stasis. John stayed away completely. No contact, no attempts, no showing up in places where he might accidentally encounter them. Just work on himself. Therapy with Dr. Martinez twice weekly, where she methodically took apart every rationalization. Parenting classes, even though he had no children to parent. You're building the person you should have been, Dr. Martinez said. Whether they ever see it or not doesn't change the necessity of the work. Then Gary ran away. Just disappeared one night after dinner. Bedroom window open, room empty. Debbie called police at 8:15 p.m. after searching everywhere. Called neighbors, called his friend's parents, drove around the neighborhood in growing panic. Nothing. Her son was gone, and she had no idea where or why. Police found him at 11:47 p.m. sitting in the lobby of John's apartment building. Security guard had called it in. Kid just sitting there for hours, wouldn't leave, wouldn't say why he was there. John came down from his apartment in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled like he'd been sleeping. Saw Gary sitting on the expensive marble floor, and his entire world stopped. "I don't even like you," Gary said, voice hollow and exhausted. "You're a liar. You abandoned us. You hurt Mom. You keep making everything worse every time you try to make it better." John knelt down slowly several feet away, not approaching too close. "I know all of that is true. But you're supposed to be my dad." Gary's voice cracked. "Everyone else gets to decide everything about my life. You decided to leave before I was born. Mom decided you have to stay away now. Richard decided he wants to be our new dad. Therapists decide what's wrong with me and what I need to fix. Teachers decide if I'm good enough or broken. Nobody asks me what I want. Nobody lets me decide anything." "You're absolutely right. That's not fair to you. I want to understand something, just one thing. Not excuses like, I was young or I was scared. I want the actual truth about why Jerry and I weren't worth staying for. Why we were a problem you needed to solve. What was so wrong with us that you could tell before we were even born?" John looked at this angry, broken 9-year-old, his son, his actual son, and chose brutal honesty over comfortable lies. "You and Jerry were always worth staying for. You were worth everything. But I wasn't brave enough to believe that. I was terrified of being poor again, of failing, of being trapped in the same poverty I grew up in, so I chose building my empire over you, because I thought success would save me from ever feeling powerless again. It didn't save me. It destroyed me. I destroyed myself trying to escape one kind of pain and created a worse kind. And I destroyed you in the process. That's the complete truth. It was never about you being flawed. It was always about my own cowardice." Gary stared at him for a long time. "Do you actually mean that, or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" "I mean every word, and I know you probably don't believe me. I wouldn't believe me either if I were you. I want to hate you completely." "You should hate me. I deserve that." "But I can't!" Gary's voice rose with frustration and pain. "Because some stupid part of my brain still wants you, even though I know you don't actually want me. Even though I know you're just trying to fix your guilt. I hate that I want you. I do want you. I want you and Jerry so much that it physically hurts to breathe sometimes. But what I want doesn't matter anymore. What you and Jerry need matters, and I genuinely don't know how to give you what you need." Debbie arrived then, out of breath and terrified, saw Gary sitting there with John. Something complicated and painful crossed her face. "Thank you for calling the police," she said to John stiffly formally. "Gary, we need to go home right now." I don't want to go home and pretend everything is fine, Gary exploded. Richard is there being nice, and you're planning a wedding, and Jerry is literally falling apart and pulling out his eyelashes, and nobody is asking me what I want about any of it. Debbie looked at John, really looked at him for the first time in months, saw exhaustion, saw genuine pain, saw something that might possibly be real underneath all the disaster. "What do you want, Gary?" she asked her son gently. "Tell me honestly. What do you actually want?" "I want to know him." Gary's voice was small now, vulnerable. "I want to understand why he left, and if he's actually changed, or if it's all just performance. I want to know if dads can actually change, or if people just stay broken forever. Because if they can't change, then what's even the point of trying at anything?" Debbie's heart broke watching her son articulate this. She looked at John again, made a decision that terrified her to her core. Supervised visits, 1 hour per week, Saturday afternoons, library cafe on Main Street. Debbie will be present the entire time at a nearby table. You miss even one visit, and we're done forever. You hurt them even slightly more than they're already hurt, and I'll get a restraining order so fast it'll make your head spin. Do you understand me? John nodded, not trusting his voice, barely able to process what she was offering. "Yes, I understand completely. This isn't forgiveness. This isn't me deciding you're suddenly trustworthy. This is me accepting that my son has a right to know his father and make his own decisions about that relationship as he gets older. Don't make me regret this." "I won't. I'll show up. I promise I'll show up." They drove Gary home. John stood in his building lobby at midnight, still in his sweatpants, and realized he'd just been given the most terrifying gift imaginable, a chance he absolutely didn't deserve and couldn't afford to waste. Chapter 7. The Building 6 months of Saturday afternoons. 1 hour exactly. Library cafe, neutral ground. Debbie always at a nearby table with a book she never actually read, just watched. At first only Jerry came. Gary refused every single week. "I'm not playing happy family. He can talk to Jerry if he wants. I don't care." But he cared, obviously cared deeply, just couldn't admit it yet, couldn't make himself that vulnerable again. Week 1, Jerry and John sat across from each other in awkward, painful silence. Jerry brought origami paper, started folding without looking up. John watched, then asked quietly, "Could you teach me that crane again? I never got it right before." Jerry's hands paused. He looked up, searching John's face for deception. Found something that might be genuine interest. "You remember I showed you before?" "Of course I remember. You taught me at the community center, and I was terrible at it." They folded cranes. John was still spectacularly bad at origami. His crane looked like a paper accident. Jerry actually giggled, first time John had heard his son laugh. "You're really awful at this." "Worst ever?" "Definitely worst ever." They both smiled. First genuine moment between father and son, fragile as tissue paper, but real. Week by week, Jerry slowly opened up. Talked about bread science, about school, about his anxiety that made him pull out eyelashes. "Do you know why I do it?" Jerry asked one afternoon. "It's because when everything feels completely out of control, at least that pain is my choice. At least I'm controlling something." John felt his heart breaking. "Jerry, you shouldn't have to hurt yourself just to feel in control of your own life." "I know that. My therapist tells me that every single week, but knowing something doesn't automatically make it stop." "What would make it stop? What would make you feel safe enough that you didn't need to hurt yourself?" Jerry thought about that for a long time. Feeling like the world is actually safe, like people won't just leave without warning, like I'm not fundamentally a problem that needs solving. "You're not a problem. You have never been a problem, not for one single second. You wrote that on a check, for the problem. Mom saved it to show us." John closed his eyes against the wave of shame. "That's the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life. Calling you a problem. You weren't the problem, Jerry. I was. I am." Jerry absorbed that. "I want to believe you when you say that. You don't have to believe me yet. Maybe someday you will. Month 3, Gary finally showed up. Didn't announce it beforehand. Just appeared beside Jerry one Saturday, arms crossed defensively. "You came," John said carefully, not making a big deal of it. "Jerry wouldn't shut up about it. I'm here to make him stop talking about you." But Gary stayed, week after that, testing, challenging every single thing John said, slowly, carefully, painfully, letting his guard down inch by inch. They learned each other gradually, carefully, like handling something explosive. John learned that Gary's anger was armor protecting his fear, that Jerry's anxiety came from trying desperately to control an uncontrollable world. The boys learned that John was genuinely terrible at anything fun but good at listening, that he remembered everything they told him, that he showed up every single Saturday without fail. Then Richard proposed to Debbie. He'd been patient for 2 years, present and kind, and everything John wasn't. One evening after the boys were in bed, he got down on one knee in her kitchen with a modest but genuine ring and honest love in his eyes. "I know it's complicated. I know you're still healing. I know the boys are processing their father being back in their lives. But I love you. I love them. I want to build a life together, slowly and carefully, but together." Debbie said yes because it made sense. Richard was safety, partnership. The man who had stayed when staying was hard. This was healthy. This was moving forward. This was what healing looked like, except Gary's reaction was immediate and hostile. "You're just going to marry the first nice guy who shows up? Dad is actually rich and successful, and you're picking a teacher." "Gary, this isn't about your father. Everything is about him. He's in our heads even when he's not physically here, and you're marrying Richard because it's easy and safe, not because you actually love him." "I do love Richard. You love that he's safe. That's completely different from loving who he actually is." 9 years old, and reading her like a book she didn't want opened. Jerry's reaction was different, but equally devastating. Silent tears for 3 straight days. Finally admitted quietly, "If Richard becomes our dad, then John never can. It becomes permanent and final. The door closes forever." "Baby, John closed that door himself 10 years ago. But what if he didn't mean to? What if he was just scared and stupid and now he's actually trying to fix it, but we won't let him because we're moving on?" "He hurt you, repeatedly and deeply. I know that, but I still don't really understand why it happened. And if we completely move on with Richard, I'll never understand. I'll spend my whole life wondering what was so wrong with me." "Nothing was wrong with you. Nothing." "Then why does it feel like everything is?" Debbie told Richard about their reactions. He was understanding, patient like always. "We'll go slow. Let them adjust. We've got time." Wedding planned for 8 months out. Plenty of time for everyone to get comfortable with the idea. But Gary started acting out worse than ever. Not just school fights now. Stealing from the convenience store on the corner. Staying out past curfew deliberately. Daring Debbie to punish him, to prove she'd eventually leave too. His therapist increased sessions to 4 times weekly. Said Gary was processing layers of abandonment compounding on themselves. Biological father left, now feared Richard would eventually leave too. And accepting Richard felt like betraying some buried hope about John he hadn't known he still carried. Then one night, Gary simply disappeared again. Window open, room empty, 9 p.m. Debbie's phone rang at 11:34. "Police. We found your son at the same apartment building as last time. Says he wants to talk to John Wayne." John came down, saw Gary sitting in the lobby looking smaller and more lost than last time. "I don't like you," Gary said again. "I don't. You're a liar and you left and you keep hurting us." "I know, but you're still my dad, like biologically, and everyone else gets fathers who stay and want them. Why don't I? Why don't Jerry and I get that? You deserve that. You deserve everything. Then why won't you actually be that?" Gary's voice broke. "Why won't you be our actual dad instead of just the guy who shows up for 1 hour on Saturdays and pretends?" "I'm not pretending during those Saturdays. Those hours are the most real thing in my entire week. But I don't know how to be more than that when your mother doesn't trust me enough to let me be more. So earn it! Do something! Prove you've changed instead of just saying it. Debbie arrived, saw them. This was becoming a pattern. Gary, home, now. Mom, Richard wants to marry you and move us somewhere new and forget about John, and I don't know what I want anymore and nobody's asking. Debbie looked at John, really looked. Saw something shifting in him, something that might be genuine transformation, saw her sons needing something she didn't know how to give them. She made a decision that terrified her even more than the first one. 2 hours, twice weekly, Tuesdays and Saturdays. Still supervised, but you can take them to the park, to dinner, places that aren't just the library. You mess this up even slightly and we go back to 1 hour weekly. You understand? John understood he was being given something precious and breakable. Yes, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your sons for giving you chances you don't deserve. Chapter 8. The Complication. 8 months of building trust slowly. 2 visits weekly. John showed up every single time, never late, never with excuses. Took the boys to parks, to museums, to simple dinners where they talked about everything and nothing. Started attending their school events when Debbie gave permission. Sitting in the back row of assemblies, watching from a distance at sports games Jerry didn't want to play but had to for PE. The boys called him John, still, not Dad. That title had to be earned, not given, but they were learning him and he was learning them. Gary opened up about his anger, about therapy, about feeling like he was fundamentally broken. Jerry showed John his bread experiments, his origami designs, his careful, precise systems for managing anxiety. Then Debbie got the phone call that changed everything. Creative director position at a major design firm, Seattle. Everything she'd sacrificed raising boys alone, triple her current income. Dream career she'd put on hold for 10 years. She accepted before fully thinking through the implications, told the boys at dinner with excitement. We're moving to Seattle. Amazing opportunity, beautiful city, fresh start for all of us. Gary's fork clattered onto his plate. You're taking us away from Dad? Again? Gary, this is about my career. You're doing it again. You're the one leaving this time. You're taking us away from him. Jerry went completely still and silent. Shut down entirely. Jerry, baby, say something. I lose everyone. His voice was flat, emotionless, terrifyingly empty. I lost Dad once. Now I lose him again. Eventually I'll lose you, then Richard. Everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves eventually. Debbie felt ice flood her veins. Nobody's leaving you. You're moving us across the country. That's leaving. That's taking us away from the one parent who's actually showing up. John found out when both boys called him crying at 9 p.m. He drove to Debbie's house immediately. She met him at the door, defensive before he even spoke. This is my life, my career. I put everything on hold for a decade, raising them alone while you built your empire. They'll adjust. Kids always adjust. You're right. It's completely your life and your career. Take it. You've earned it. He turned to leave. You're letting us go? Gary screamed from the stairs. Again? You're just letting her take us away? John turned back, utterly destroyed. I can't trap your mother in a life she doesn't want. She deserves this opportunity. She sacrificed everything. I can't ask her to sacrifice more. So we don't matter. You matter more than anything in this world, but what I want doesn't get to control your mother's life. Debbie watched this, saw something genuine in his pain, saw him choosing her agency over his wants. It cracked something inside her armor. 2 weeks passed. Debbie packing, boys getting more withdrawn and hostile daily. John showed up for every scheduled visit, helped pack without being asked, didn't fight or argue or try to change her mind. 3 weeks before the move, Jerry collapsed at school. Full severe panic attack. Ambulance, hospital, doctor, looking at Debbie with serious concern. This child is in acute crisis. The stress is causing physical symptoms. He needs intensive support immediately. Jerry, in the hospital bed, crying to Debbie. I lose everyone. I lost Dad before. Now I lose him again. Next time I'll lose you because everyone eventually leaves me. I must be the problem. There must be something wrong with me that makes people want distance. Debbie broke, completely shattered. sat in the hospital bathroom sobbing because she realized she was repeating John's pattern, choosing career ambition over her children's emotional needs, just in a different form. History repeating itself. That night, 2 a.m., she went to John's apartment. Knocked. He answered in sweatpants, terrified something had happened. "I'm scared," Debbie said without preamble. "Of what?" "That I still love you. That I never actually stopped. That I wasted 10 years hating you when I could have been healing. That this job is just me running from the fact that watching you father our sons makes me fall in love with you all over again, and I absolutely don't want to." Her voice broke. "You broke me once. You'll break me again. That's what you do." John stepped closer. "I will disappoint you again. I'm human. I'll fail. But I won't abandon you. I won't choose ambition over you and them. I learned what actually matters. It took losing everything to learn it, but I learned. I can't trust that." "Then don't trust me. Trust what you can actually see. 15 months of showing up, every single time. I chose them over every business opportunity, every social event, everything. I chose you over everything, even when you weren't choosing me back." Debbie started crying. "I'm scared that the second I let you in, you'll realize we're ordinary, that we're boring, that your empire was more exciting than PTA meetings and homework arguments, and Jerry's anxiety and Gary's attitude." John took her hands. "Debbie, listen to me. I have $10 million sitting in the bank. I could rebuild my entire empire tomorrow if I wanted. Investors call me monthly, begging me to start something new. I don't want it. I want Jerry teaching me origami even though I'm terrible at it. I want Gary's sarcasm and challenges keeping me honest. I want you yelling at me for letting them eat ice cream before dinner. I want ordinary. I spent 10 years chasing extraordinary success and died inside from loneliness. You brought me back to life. Those boys brought me back. I turned down Seattle this morning, not for you, for them. Jerry in that hospital bed made me realize I was doing to them exactly what you did, choosing career over their needs." "And what do you need, Debbie? Not what the boys need. What do you need?" Long silence. "I need you to kiss me. I need you to prove that everything I felt 10 years ago wasn't stupid and naive. I need you to show me that love isn't just about showing up for children, it's about choosing me too." John kissed her. 10 years of grief and loss and slow healing and earned redemption in one kiss. Chapter 9. The Breaking Point. That kiss changed everything and nothing. Debbie pulled away, terrified. "This doesn't fix anything. This doesn't mean we're suddenly together. I just needed to know if it was still there." "And is it?" "Yes. God help me, yes. But I don't know what to do with that." They stood in John's doorway at 2 a.m., the city sleeping around them, everything uncertain. "We have time to figure it out," John said. "You're not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. We have time." But they didn't have as much time as they thought, because Richard knew. Somehow, he knew. Maybe he saw it in how Debbie looked at John during school events. Maybe he heard it in how she talked about him. Maybe he just felt it. 2 weeks later, Richard proposed something that shattered Debbie's fragile new equilibrium. "I got another offer, New York this time. Even better than Seattle, principal of the top private school in Manhattan, but I need to know where we stand. Are you choosing me or are you choosing to chase John Wayne's ghost?" "I'm not chasing, you are. You've been chasing him for 10 years, either chasing him away or chasing him back, but always chasing. I've been here, present, real, for 2 years, but you're still tangled up in him." Richard wasn't wrong. He was good and kind and present, and she couldn't love him the way he deserved because she was still drowning in complicated feelings about John. "I can't go to New York," Debbie said quietly. "I can't uproot the boys again. They're finally stable. Because of John. Because they need their father, both of them. Jerry is finally sleeping through the night. Gary has gone 3 months without suspension. They need this stability. And what about what I need? What about me? You deserve someone who chooses you first, who loves you without reservations, who isn't carrying 10 years of history with someone else." Richard looked at her for a long moment. "You're in love with him. Still. Again. Whatever. You're in love with John Wayne, and you have been this whole time, even when you hated him." Debbie started to deny it, then stopped. "I don't know what I feel. It's too complicated to call it love. But yes, I feel something, and I can't pretend I don't anymore." "Then I'm out." Richard's voice was gentle despite the pain. "I love you. I love those boys. But I can't compete with their actual father. Even when he's terrible, he's still their dad. And I deserve to be someone's first choice, not their safe backup plan." He kissed her forehead with genuine affection despite everything. "I hope he becomes the man you need him to be. For your sake and for those boys. They deserve that." Richard left that night, packed his things from her house where he'd slowly been moving in, left with dignity and grace and broken heart. Good man, wrong timing, wrong ghosts. Debbie told the boys the next morning, "Richard and I broke up. He got a job offer in New York and I couldn't move you boys again." Gary's reaction, "Did you break up because of John? It's complicated. Did you break up because you're in love with Dad?" Debbie sat in shocked silence, her 9-year-old son reading her like a book. "I don't know what I feel about John. It's too messy to have a simple name. But you feel something that made you pick him over Richard. I picked you. I picked stability for you and Jerry." "You picked Dad," Gary said quietly. "It's okay to admit it, Mom. I see how you look at him now. It's different than before, less angry, more, I don't know, more something." Jerry spoke up quietly. "Is Dad going to live with us now?" "No, baby, absolutely not. This doesn't change anything about the visits or the schedule. But it changed everything, whether Debbie wanted to admit it or not. Because now everyone knew, including Debbie herself, that she still had feelings for John Wayne, that 10 years of anger and hurt hadn't killed what they'd started before he destroyed it. That maybe, possibly, there could be something on the other side of all this pain if they were brave enough to reach for it. 2 weeks after Richard left, Jerry's 10th birthday arrived. Small party at home, just family and a few school friends. Jerry made one choice that surprised everyone. He invited John, and he invited Richard too. Wrote both invitations himself in his careful handwriting. "Please come to my birthday party. 2 p.m. Saturday. I want both my dads there." From Jerry. Both my dads. Richard came because he still cared about the boys despite the breakup. Brought the perfect gift, a professional bread-making kit with precise thermometers and scales for Jerry's baking obsession. Jerry's face lit up. "This is perfect. Thank you." John arrived 15 minutes later, visibly nervous. Brought a simple gift, book on bread science and molecular gastronomy. Handwritten note inside. "For my son who teaches me patience and precision every day, I'm so proud of who you're becoming. Love, John." Jerry held that book like it was precious. "Thank you. This is exactly what I wanted." The party continued awkwardly with both men present. Other parents noticed, whispered. Gary watched from the doorway, seeing Jerry happy, seeing Richard's kindness, seeing John's careful presence, seeing his mother trying to hold everything together. Then something broke inside Gary, not anger this time, pure grief. He collapsed in the middle of the living room, surrounded by birthday decorations and confused kids and frozen adults, and started sobbing from somewhere so deep and broken that the sound barely came out. "Why didn't you want us when we were born?" he finally screamed at John through tears. "What was wrong with us? Why weren't we enough? Other people have babies and they want them, and you just threw us away like we were garbage." Every person in that room froze. The handful of birthday guests stood in uncomfortable silence, not knowing whether to leave or stay. John crossed the room and knelt in front of Gary. Nothing was wrong with you, not one single thing." "Then why?" "Because everything was wrong with me. I was so focused on building a life I thought mattered. Money, power, success, winning, that I didn't understand the only life that actually matters was the one I could have built with you. I didn't know that all that success means absolutely nothing if you're alone at the top. I can't fix what I did. I can't give you back those 10 years. I can only be sorry forever and show up now and hope that someday you might believe that I've actually changed. Gary collapsed into him, sobbing. I just wanted you to want us. That's all I ever wanted, just for you to want us like other dads want their kids. I do want you. God, I want you so much it physically hurts sometimes, both of you, every single day. I wake up knowing I missed the first 10 years of your lives and I'll never get them back, and it's entirely my fault and I deserve all the pain, but you don't deserve it and I'm so sorry. Jerry joined the hug without being asked. 3 of them on the floor crying while birthday guests quietly left, and Debbie watched her sons finally breaking open with their father. Richard watched from the kitchen doorway, saw the truth he'd been trying to ignore. They were a family unit that he could never fully penetrate. John would always be their father, no matter how terrible he'd been. And that was actually how it should be. He found Debbie in the hallway after most guests had gone. They'll always need him, Richard said gently. And that's right. That's how it should be. He's their father. Even when he's terrible at it, even when he fails, he's still their dad. But I deserve to be someone's first choice, not someone's consolation prize while they work through their feelings about someone else. Richard, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. You gave me 2 good years. You showed me what a real family could be like, but you're not ready for what I need. You're still untangling yourself from him, loving him, hating him, needing to understand him. I can't be in the middle of that anymore. He kissed her forehead one last time with genuine affection. I hope he becomes the man you need, for your sake and for those boys. They deserve their father, and you deserve to figure out what he means to you without me standing in the way. Richard left with grace and dignity, good man walking away from a situation where he'd always be second. Debbie stood in her hallway and realized she was truly alone now, single mother again, no safety net, no backup plan, just her and 2 boys and the father who'd abandoned them, trying to rebuild from absolute ruins. But her sons were breathing, actually breathing. For the first time in 10 years, they were processing their pain instead of drowning in it. Maybe that was worth the terror of being alone. Maybe that was worth the uncertainty. Maybe. Chapter 10. The Earned Life. 15 months of consistent presence after that birthday. John showed up every single time without fail. Every weekend visit, every school event when invited, every moment he was allowed to be part of their lives, he was there. No excuses, no emergencies more important, no business opportunities that came first. He rebuilt his consulting practice around their schedule, worked from home, took client calls at odd hours, chose them over every opportunity that conflicted. The boys watched him make those choices again and again. They still called him John, though, not Dad. That title had to be earned over years, not months. But they were building something real, slowly, carefully, like constructing a house on ground that had collapsed before. Debbie stayed single, dated nobody, focused on healing herself, on building her business back up, on learning to co-parent with the man who'd destroyed her 10 years ago. They were finding a rhythm, cordial, functional, sometimes even friendly, good for the boys. Then the question neither of them had really addressed directly. What were they to each other now? It came to a head 6 months after Richard left. Debbie invited John inside after he dropped the boys off from a weekend visit. Unusual. Normally he stayed on the porch. "We need to talk about what's happening between us," Debbie said without preamble. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. I see how you look at me. I know how I look at you. The boys have noticed. We're dancing around something and pretending we're not." John sat down carefully on her couch. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know, that's the problem. Part of me still hates you for what you did. Part of me is terrified you'll do it again. Part of me remembers who you were before and wonders if that person still exists somewhere. And part of me—" She stopped. "Part of you what?" "Part of me is falling in love with who you're becoming, or maybe falling back in love with who you used to be before ambition ate you alive. I don't even know anymore." "I'm falling in love with you too," John said quietly. "Or maybe I never stopped being in love with you and just buried it under 10 years of guilt and shame. But I'm terrified of saying that because what right do I have after what I did?" They sat in silence for a long moment. "I need time," Debbie finally said. "The boys need stability more than I need resolution about us. Can you accept that? Can you accept that this might take years to figure out?" "I'll take whatever you're willing to give, even if it's just friendship, even if it's just co-parenting, even if you decide you can never forgive me, I'll still show up for them. I know you will. That's why I'm willing to try, because you've proven with 15 months of consistency that you're not the same person who wrote that check." They didn't kiss that night, didn't make promises, just acknowledged what was there and agreed to move slowly. 6 months later they were together, not officially living together, but together in every way that mattered. John spent most nights at her place. They had family dinners, went to school events together, were building something new from the ashes of what he'd destroyed. The boys noticed. Jerry asked one night, "Are you guys like boyfriend and girlfriend now?" Debbie and John looked at each other. "We're figuring it out," Debbie said. "Is that okay with you?" "Yeah, I think so. It's weird, but good weird. Like our family is finally fixing itself." Gary was more direct. "If you guys are together, does that mean John can move in?" "Slow down," Debbie said. "We're taking this very slowly. Mom, he's been here every day for like 6 months. How is that different from living here?" John laughed. "They have a point." 1 year later, small backyard wedding, simple ceremony. Jerry and Gary as joint best men, arguing playfully over who got to hold the rings. Jerry won after a spirited debate about alphabetical order versus age order versus who was more responsible. John stood at the altar in a simple suit, crying before Debbie even appeared. When she walked down the aisle, he completely lost it, tears streaming down his face as she reached him. His vows broke everyone. "You gave me sons I didn't deserve, a second chance I didn't earn, a family I destroyed, and somehow you let me help rebuild. I promise to choose you every day, choose them every day, choose US over everything that used to matter to me. When ambition whispers that I could have more, I'll remember that I already have everything that actually matters. You are my everything." Debbie's vows were equally powerful. "You broke my heart into pieces 10 years ago. Then you spent 2 years carefully putting every single piece back together. That's not just redemption. That's love. Real, hard-won, earned love. I promise to keep letting you prove you've changed, to believe in second chances, to choose us even when fear tells me to run. We're building something real from broken pieces. That's the strongest kind of love there is." They kissed, and the boys cheered loudly. Gary yelled over the applause, "Finally! Can we eat cake now?" Everyone laughed. The reception was simple. Backyard party with family and close friends. John danced with Debbie as the sun set. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually built a family from absolute ruins. You did it. You kept them alive and safe and loved when I was too much of a coward to help. I just showed up after you did all the hard work. You showed up. That's what matters. You showed up, and you kept showing up even when it was hard, even when we didn't make it easy." Later that night, boys asleep in their rooms, John and Debbie cleaned up the backyard together. Domestic, simple, perfect. John picked up paper plates while Debbie wrapped leftover cake. "I lost an empire to gain a kingdom," John said quietly. Debbie kissed him. "Best trade you ever made. I'll never stop showing up. You know that, right? Not for you, not for them. I'll be here until I die. I know. That's why I finally let myself believe in you. That's why I'm choosing forever." They stood in their backyard, not John's fancy penthouse, not some expensive venue, just their simple backyard where their boys played, and held each other as the stars came out. The sons he denied became the boys who saved him. The woman he abandoned became the wife who healed him. The ordinary life he rejected became the extraordinary life he earned through years of showing up when it would have been easier to walk away. He'd climbed the wrong mountain for 40 years, but now finally he was on solid ground, with his family, where he belonged, where he should have been all along. The end.